watch it learn, watch it learn. Get that thing cranking, yeah, slash, slash, burn. Fold to the knees, yeah, crank it like a chainsaw. Fold to the knees, yeah, crank it like a chainsaw.
And we're live.
Hello and welcome back to another Come Inside for a Nice Dinner with the Family episode of the First Time Watchers podcast.
Massacre? I just met her. Because we like to watch.
My name is Tim Costa.
I'm Hermano de Silva.
And this is Walter Vinci.
And if you'd like to send feedback, you can always email us at firsttimewatchers@gmail.com. No feedback this week, guys. This being the end of Spooky Movie Month, I think maybe one thing I would like our listeners to do is send us their own Spooky Movie Month recommendations, Mm-hmm. I think that'd be pretty cool. What are your go-to films? What are some overlooked films, if you will, that aren't the go-tos that you go to and most other people don't talk about? Give me that. Give us that. I want to see an under-discussed horror film.
Under-discussed horror film.
Kind of like what Hermano talked about last week with Society, for example.
Everyone recommends Society.
Yeah.
Pile on with Society.
Right. So, listeners, please email us, tweet us, send smoke signals, carrier pigeons, whatever. We want to hear.
DMs are open. Slide in.
Slide into Wally's DMs. He wants those
Go
dick
right ahead.
pics.
They're always open.
He wants those dick pics.
I collect them. And then I send them to scammers when they ask me for money.
Right. Anyways, moving on. In this episode, we finish off Spooky Movie Month by crossing off a list of shame for you, Wally, by discussing the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But before we get into that, it is time for Yay or Nay. This is the part of the show where we discuss what we have seen recently on our own. I will go first. I went out to the theater to go see the latest DCEU movie, and that is Black Adam, starring Dwayne Johnson and a bunch of other people. Guys, this is a weird movie. It's pretty strange. I will say you could probably have seen just in the trailers that the fight scenes, any action scenes, they're not really well done. They're not well done. There's no sense of spatial geography. It's really bad editing, and it's not just the editing of the fight scenes. It's also editing of the film overall, where people end up in places that just don't make any sense, and they're suddenly in one place and then the other. So I mean, it's not terrible. It's just it's perfectly mediocre, if not a hair under mediocre. I think the casting of Johnson is actually works well for the character. I think his acting sensibilities suit the role and what's required of him. But we're introduced to these characters of the Justice Society, which is let me see here. Hawkman.
Hawkman.
Yeah.
Cyclone.
Cyclone. Yep. And all of these characters are like weird riffs of people we're already really familiar with in like the MCU. Now, I don't know when they were originally written or whatever, and compared to Marvel characters or anything like that. But still, it's just really strange to see, like a Doctor Strange type of character with the same type of abilities, but we have no introduction. We have no history with these characters at all. They're just introduced, and we get very brief intros to these people, and other than that, it's just like they're thrown in, and they're this like B-level Justice League group that are world peace protectors or something like that, and they come into this area, and I don't know, it's strange. Like, I have no idea what their sensibilities are really, or their abilities, and we're just kind of introduced on the fly. Like, overall, the movie's fine. It has interesting ties to Shazam, which kind of surprised me. And look, it actually makes me curious how any of these characters will interact in the future, which is actually a pretty big indictment of how this movie works on its own. So this is the ultimate meh for Black Adam. And then because I rewatched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, I decided after that I'll watch the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre that premiered on Netflix earlier this year. Hermano, I know you've seen this one.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun.
You liked it a lot, really.
A lot.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Look.
Well, you got to be in a certain mind frame. Again, like I went into it, I got right on its wavelength right away, and that helped a lot. If you're not on its wavelength, it's obviously not going to be good.
Well, that's interesting that you were able to get on its wavelength because it throws so much at you in the opening with these, once again, characters who are barely set up with their motivations for being together or even going to this specific ghost town. I have no idea who these people are and why they're there. Then this busload of investors show up in this party bus to attend an auction. I'm not even sure what the auction was for, really. And even the setup for the return of Leatherface is handled in a really ridiculous way. Like just the fact that one of these characters who we're introduced to in the beginning decides to go in this van that Leatherface's mother is being transported in because she's ill. It's just such a strange decision. I don't even understand it. Look, yes, I understand. This movie is highlighted by a specific scene in this party bus. Like the rivers of blood that spew from this scene it's pretty amusing. And specifically in this scene, there's a part where the chainsaw becomes a man's erect penis in a specific kill. And that's amusing. I don't know if you remember that, Hermano.
I do.
Yeah.
How can I forget?
So look, but the characters are so shallow. Look, we're going to get into this, I'm sure, with the original movie in terms of these characters and their setup and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. This is okay. So then there's this one of the characters, one of the girls is one of the final girls. Her backstory is that she's a school shooting survivor, and the way that they try to connect that to her resulting trauma, how that affects her during the events of this film, is really poorly handled. It's so poorly handled, it's borderline insulting. Like, do you have any recollection of this, Hermano?
I do. I think it was mostly to set up the fact that there's a bit of survivor's guilt on her part.
Yeah.
And also, she's traumatized clearly by it.
Well,
and now she's experiencing an event that it's another life or death event. And is she going to rise to the challenge, basically? It's very, yes, it's paper thin, but
oh, yeah.
I was fine with it.
This movie is just under 90 minutes, and that's fine if that's what you're looking for in this type of movie. But if you're introducing that type of character beat, you either need to pad the runtime in order to flesh that out more, or streamline the movie in order to make her the sole central character. And that's really the only connection, because it follows her sister more than I think it does her, or maybe it's equal time, whatever. And yeah, I don't know. It's just such a strange decision to even bother to include that, because to me, it feels like they could have excised those flashbacks and the movie would have been no different, essentially. I don't know. And, okay, so the very end of this movie is very cruel to the characters and even to the viewer, I think. In terms of comparing it to the original one, I will say it's just really interesting how much gore and blood is in this movie compared to the original, because the original has virtually none. I'm
going to say it's because of budgetary reasons.
Sure, fair enough, but even so. Yeah, that's a kind of a nay for the original.
Wait. You cannot leave without mentioning that final shot.
The final shot
of the girl in the car.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, I don't want to spoil it.
It's all you were saying is there was a girl in a car.
Well, I just want to say,
I thought it was so fun, and that's the shot that you should really.
No, it's ridiculous to me, because why is she in that position? Why does she stay in that position? It's such an odd callback to the original film, because it's once again, we're going to get into the original film and especially that ending, and the emotions that run over that final girl's face. But it's so static in terms of just the one emotion, and it's not even that well acted. I mean, I like Elsie Fisher, I guess, and she's fine in this movie overall. I mean, I liked her a lot more in 8th Grade from a few years back. I thought that was an excellent movie, and she had a great performance. But um, the final shot in this, it's borderline laughable.
That's why I loved it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
not. I don't think it's meant to be taken seriously. I think a lot of this movie is not meant to be taken seriously.
Well, look,
it's
you have,
almost a satire.
Are you kidding me? Because yeah, they bring back the final girl from the original film in like a Sarah Connor-esque way. And
Yeah.
and what happens to her and the like the decisions that she makes are ridiculous considering that she's been like Laurie Stroding this for the past 50 years, getting ready for the inevitable confrontation, and then she shows up and then just makes the most ridiculous, insane decisions. I'm like, this while pining over her lost friends. I'm like, what the fuck?
I think you're making my point for me too.
Oh.
All of that you're saying, it's all. I think it's all a send up in a way. Like, I mean, just literally just the fact that Leatherface one is still alive and must be easily in his 70s and is still pulling off what he's doing in this film is even more remarkable than what Michael Myers has been doing in those films.
Okay,
it's like insane, and I think, yeah, like the other at least the first new Michael Myers film was already out, possibly even the second one by this point.
Yeah,
and I just think it's sort of like I'm not saying it's a a clear send up of like what they've been doing with those films, but it kind of feels like that to me. Like I don't think anything in this film is meant to be taken like seriously. Like it's this is like some like art piece, like Ari Aster directed it or something.
No, I don't think so either. But I think it's trying to be a clear direct sequel and homage in a way. And man,
but inserting, I think, a little bit more of a, I don't know, entertainment and fun,
like a tongue-in-cheek aspect.
Yeah, sort of.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean,
the first one is pretty. We'll get there.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I certainly wasn't on the same wavelength as you. So it didn't work.
I was probably in a mood. I'll admit that. I've been in a mood lately with some of these. Especially since I've been really loving the hour-and-a-half film lately.
I bet you have. Speaking of, what have you seen recently?
All right, I watched a couple of actually 3 things from this year. First thing, a new film that dropped on Netflix, an Australian film called The Stranger.
Oh, okay. Directed
by Thomas M. Wright, starring Joel Edgerton and Sean Harris. 2 men who meet on a plane and strike up a conversation that turns into a friendship. For Henry Teague, worn down by a lifetime of physical labor and crime, this is a dream come true. So Sean Harris plays the Henry Teague character. We're first introduced to him. He meets a person on a bus. Randomly, they strike up a conversation, and from that, Sean Harris is introduced into a crime syndicate.
Oh, I was gonna say, is this like a send up of the Strangers on a Train?
No. It's based on a true story. I guess a crime that occurred in Australia, and it's basically Joel Edgerton is playing. I don't know how much I want to say about this, but you know it right away. You know what? I'll just say it. Joel Edgerton is playing an undercover cop, and so is the guy that he meets on the bus. And basically the entire thing is a sting operation. And I've heard of these sting operations before, and I always thought they were kind of genius to get like a criminal to confess their crime. Is basically like pretending like you're introducing them into some big crime organization. And because the crime organization needs to know your history so that they could be prepared for any sort of police, additional police presence that might have an eye on you because of your history or whatever. So you need to be truthful and admit your crimes so that they can be prepared or try to clear things up using their connections. So basically, the police use this as a ploy to try to get criminals to basically admit to their crimes. all wild, pretending like there's some big crime organization that really wants to help them. So it's a really well done film. It's really like kind of understated and subdued. It's kind of almost like a mood piece. If you had told me that it kind of comes a little bit from the school of like Nicholas Winding Refn with the dialogue. So you know how like there was much said about like Ryan Gosling and his line delivery in Only God Forgives and in Drive.
Right.
The line delivery in this film is very similar. It's like very few words are spoken, and when they are, it like lingers. Like it's just kind of words just hang there for a while for you to like really like soak it in, like what's being said, and you have to kind of read between the lines of like what characters are saying, because obviously they're not always telling the truth, and you have to try to like suss things out. So it's pretty well done. It's if you're into sort of like the a procedural, a kind of sting operation type movie where they're trying to get someone to admit something, it's pretty well done. So I'd say mild yay for The Stranger. I watched the movie for family night that I instantly regretted because I think my oldest son might have not been quite ready for it.
Ooh.
I watched Fall.
Fall. Oh, jeez.
Tim, did you see this? I can't remember.
No, I am very curious about this movie though. Because the premise sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I think Wally would get into. Well, you've heard of this film, right? Fall.
What was it?
Fall. Have you heard of Fall?
I have not.
Oh, you might like it. So directed by Scott Mann, starring people I didn't recognize. Best friends Becky and Hunter find themselves at the top of a 2,000-foot radio tower. It's a single location film where two climbers get stuck at the top of a 2,000-foot radio tower that is not in service.
Yeah. I saw the poster for this. Okay.
It's pretty well done. If you guys are into thrillers, it's really well done. It's a little longer than I would have expected it to be. It's an hour and 47 minutes long, but it doesn't feel like it. Like it definitely feels like a film where you're invested in the characters. It's very harrowing and thrilling, and you really they don't skimp on really showing the height of this thing and how tall they are and how effed they are and how they're trying to figure out how they could possibly signal for help. And there's at least two elements in this film where I realized it was PG-13. I didn't think it would get very graphic, but there's at least two scenes where it gets pretty graphic, especially one towards the end. And I was like, ooh, boy, I don't know if my son was ready for this, but he handled it pretty well, and he hasn't been mentioning it, and he hasn't had nightmares or asked to see a therapist. So,
but how old is he now?
I think I'm okay. He's 9.
Okay, how old were you when you saw something like Jaws?
Oh, much younger.
Yeah, see, we're all fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine. He'll end up just totally cool like me. So yeah, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. Wally, I know you've said in the past you like single location films. I think it'll hit that button for you. So yay for Fall. And then I think I'm probably the only one that's been watching House of the Dragon.
Yeah, no.
Just wrapped up. Tim.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
I'm sure it is. I just have no interest. I have other things to watch.
I know you've been hearing all the buzz about how good it is. Don't deny it. It's really good. I mean, I had set a pretty low bar, and I wouldn't say it was, completely low, but I basically went into it thinking like I'll give it a couple episodes, and if it's on par with Game of Thrones, I'll continue to watch. And in my opinion, it's definitely on par with Game of Thrones. If you like Game of Thrones, it's practically a no-brainer. It's all the same stuff with even more dragons. Considering we're following the Targaryens this time and the Valerians, at their height of their power. Of course, it's all the same stuff. They're fighting over the Iron Throne, and there's other families introduced. There's going to be a lot of familiar names thrown about, and stuff like that. But it's all the same, posturing and political stuff, positioning and all that stuff to try to get on the Iron Throne, and backstabbing and all that stuff. And it's really, really well done. I was completely surprised by that it was able to match and completely erase kind of some of that stink of like the final season of Game of Thrones and get me completely back on board for like this fantasy drama. So yeah, man, I would honestly, Tim, I would tell you to watch this. I know you've been high on Lord of the Rings, but I gave up on that show like 3 episodes in.
Interesting.
I couldn't do it.
Wow.
I just thought I was watching both at the same time, and House of the Dragon grabbed me so much more than Lord of the Rings ever could. I thought the characters were so strong on House of the Dragon as well. So yeah, I recommend for House of the Dragon. Still no sign of Walter, huh?
Yeah, even I am starting to get concerned at this point.
More concerned or less concerned than the other weird stuff that's been happening since he disappeared?
What, like the Cenobites being here and the disappearing?
More like how other things in the studio keep disappearing and reappearing?
I don't know, but guess what show should always appear on your playlist?
The In Session Film Podcast.
That's right, Tim. Wait, what?
Even the promos are acting weird again. Anyways, that's right, Tim. The In Session Film Podcast is JD and Brendan.
There it is again. The rage at someone else taking Brendan from me.
Anyways, each week, the In Session Film Podcast chooses a movie to review.
Then creates a top 3 list based on what they just saw.
This week, the In Session Film Podcast is reviewing the latest DC film, Black Adam.
And continue their Studio Ghibli movie series by discussing The Secret World of Arrietty.
You can find their show on Apple Podcasts by searching for, you guessed it, the In Session Film Podcast.
Or on the web at InSessionFilm.com.
So if you're on the mood for more great movie reviews and discussion,
then check out the In Session Film Podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Or on the web at InSessionFilm.com.
So, what else has disappeared?
Look.
It's the fridge.
Which has a demon portal inside of it, right?
Right.
Look.
What the hell? There's food inside.
MovieMavericks.com, broadcasting current box office breakdowns, movie news, and reviews. Now for your hosts, Jason and Trevor.
Hey now, even though we're over 200 episodes deep into the Movie Mavericks podcast, it's still not too late to start listening.
Where every show we give you 10 truths, 20 lies, and a bunch of Hollywood secrets.
It's like existentialism slipping into nihilism.
MovieMavericks.com.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Okay, let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths. In particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The plot. 5 friends head out to rural Texas to visit the grave of a grandfather. On the way, they stumble across what appears to be a deserted house, only to discover something sinister within. The director, Toby Hooper, the actors, Marilyn Burns, Edwin Neal, Alan Danziger, and others as well. Walter, this was a list of shame film for you, something you had never seen before for some reason.
This is true.
And how is a movie like this, never come across your viewing pleasure?
Well, after watching it, I could see why.
Oh,
this movie is I can see its influence. Let me preface that. I can see how this movie has influenced a lot of other horror filmmakers. I can see how this movie definitely influenced Sam Raimi in how certain scenes are shot, and even using some of the shots and scenes that you see today still. But overall, like, this movie is not that. It's not that. I didn't feel any sort of tension or like what's gonna like stakes or like the feelings that I want to feel in a horror movie. I didn't get any of them. Leatherface is not a scary guy. He's not. He is like you know, they have those like S tier, A tier. You ever see those like charts? Like, he's at the very bottom. He's like easy to avoid.
Well, what do you consider scary then in terms of movies like this?
I mean, in terms of movies like this, I want to feel tension. Like, I don't necessarily feel scared at horror movies. What I look for is that, like, holy shit, that's fucked up. I mean, or like, how the fuck are they gonna get out of this? Like,
well, and then what kind of
like, oh, they're gonna get killed.
What kind of
like,
character? What kind of characters in these movies bring that out in you?
That's a good question, because like a lot of the movies that I tend to gravitate toward in in the horror sphere are things like the movies that best way of like movies that I absolutely like adore hands down is like shit like VHS, ABCs of Death, where I'm kind of watching it, trying to figure out like watching it and going, what's gonna happen here, and then like getting that payoff, boom, chick's a fucking vampire demon and flies away with somebody, like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I want out of a horror movie. Things like I had a good time with what's the name of the movie? I'm blanking on the name right now, where like the weird family is playing like tag. Ready or Not.
Ready or Not, yes.
Yes, Ready or Not.
Like, that movie was fun. It was different. It's weird. It's technically a horror movie, but like I don't find it scary. But it's at least interesting. Like, horror movies you need to catch my interest. You need to give me something. Like, the Saw movies are like that. I love things like the Final Destination movies, because like it's like a puzzle that's unfolding. That's the kind of stuff that I tend to gravitate towards. I find movies like Friday the 13th like fun to watch because they get creative with the kills. You know what I mean? Freddy, another like Friday the Nightmare on Elm Street is another one. It gets creative. Scream was creative. This didn't really do anything. It's just a guy with a chainsaw. I've seen that in every fucking haunted house I've ever been in. Ones that I've worked at and ones that I've gone to for fun. It's not a bad guy that I'm necessarily afraid of. I'm not afraid of the mute guy who doesn't really have any motivations to do the things that he does. He just does them because it's a chainsaw and chainsaws are scary.
Hermano, so are those fighting words for you?
Tim, it might surprise you, but no. Wally and I are going to be singing Kumbaya.
Wow.
This is only the third time I've seen this film, and I haven't seen it since probably the late 90s. And I can't even recall what prompted me to watch it that second time, because I remember kind of feeling very similar to Wally. I could see its influence on future horror directors, but I couldn't. And again, I'm not going to give it so much shit, because again, you got to put yourself back in 1974, and I think in 1974 it was easier to scare and wow people with this film. The fear of picking up a weird hitchhiker or unexpectedly walking into some death house, that on its surface like would probably be scary in 1974. But now I think for like a newer generation, you got to scare them with like elevated horror where like you take away their health insurance or something. like that's true terror of like, how am I going to survive without health insurance? This one, it's like, I just remember being much the way I felt about Hellraiser. Like, I felt like, Pinhead is kind of silly as well as the rest of the Cenobites. I also felt that Leatherface was kind of silly, you know. I think it wasn't until future films where they, I think, try to expand a little bit on, you know, the first film, where the first film, to be fair, doesn't have much of a plot. It has a very, very skimpy plot. And the rest of it is you're just hanging out with characters, and it feels very freeform. And I would believe if you told me that they were just, you know, ad-libbing all their lines. Like, because nothing feels like, you know, particularly written to service a plot. It just feels like people just having casual conversations. But again, that's not to say that I don't see some influence here. I do think there were some shots, especially, I think the film really crescendos at the end. I think it all sort of comes together, though there's still some elements there where I thought are a little bit kind of wacky, and maybe doesn't do the film any, you know, favors. But again, like, I know that this film, you know, you know what happened too is, like, as I was watching this, Mia was watching it with me, and I had so conflated this film with, like, I think part 2. I think I had conflated it with one of the remakes in, like, the early 2000s. I just had mixed them all together because I couldn't really remember the first one that much, and I really did have a different memory of it. Like, I thought the family figured in a lot more. I thought the way characters were dispatched was very different. I didn't think a lot of characters were dispatched so quickly. I didn't remember. All right, before I say this next thing, I just want to get your guys' opinion. The character in the wheelchair, is he just wheelchair bound, or does he also have some mental issues?
I don't know. Maybe social.
Either way.
Maybe social issues. You know, but
yeah, I don't think it's ever explicitly said, like, that he has, like, maybe learning disability or you know, something else going on. But that character annoyed the shit out of me.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I don't know if that was the point, but if it was the point, congrats, it worked. But yeah, I just hated most of the characters. Aside, I guess, from the final girl, you know, like, her situation obviously is very harrowing. You can't help but get on, you know, on board with her. But I think lastly, like, a lot of the things for this film come down to budget. I mean, the film has an estimated, like, $300,000 budget.
That seems high.
It shows because, like you said, like, there's not a lot of gore. This film doesn't go as hard as, you know, the 2022 one, which goes crazy with the gore and the graphic details of what's going on and what a chainsaw do to a human body. This one, you know, it's implied. Everything's basically implied. So I think it does the best it can with, like, a low budget film, but at the end of the day, this feels like a film that, you know, a buddy of mine made, and you know, I would say, hey, pretty good, you know, considering it's a low budget film. But I don't know, I don't know, I don't revere it, I guess, as much as many horror fans do.
Well, I guess I will be the lone defender of this movie, and I can kind of see though why why someone, you know, you two specifically may come out of this movie, you know, with less regard, because the first half, you know, isn't much different than extremely low budget horror movies that we've seen of this era, such as a movie like Last House on the Left, or even up to the original Friday the 13th. You know, there's low grade camera equipment, paper thin script, like you're saying. I wouldn't be surprised either if they're ad libbing much of it, if not all of it. And the acting isn't great either, you know, and we just seem to be, like, biding our time until we get to the house. Like, we're, like, padding the runtime. Like, even the opening and the cuts of the people that they're interacting with to get directions, you know, it's weird. You know, it's not well handled because we really don't know what they're doing or why they're going anywhere. And even the hitchhiker that they pick up, yes, he features later in the film, which I think is pretty predictable that he's going to show up and later on in the film. Even that interaction, you know, nobody really acts realistically, and I don't know if you're looking for that for realistic actions or moments in a film of this era, of this type or whatever, but like I said, it all just seems to be, you know, treading water until we get to the second half. And to me, you know, the second half, you know, is when this true terror really appears, and And it helps, I think, though, that a good portion of it starts happening in the daytime, and even the very end of the movie is in daylight. And there's no music. It's just unadulterated fear and no reason for the horrors that are happening. And honestly, I think one of the most unnerving scenes I've seen in any horror film is that chase through the moonlit woods. And I think it's just so well done. I think that scene, as well as the dinner table scene, are remarkable in terms of how they're edited. And like the chase through the woods, one thing that adds to this terror is like the lack of spatial geography. And all it is just screaming and running and chainsaw sounds with a camera that's like placed in the most random areas. And I think it just does a great job of capturing this absolute fear of someone who has no idea what the fuck is happening. I mean, were you just not on board with this movie once we get to that scene, Wally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of its problem is that it takes a long time to get to the goods, as it were. You know what I mean? I mean, I can say, from a filmmaking standpoint, the chase through the woods at night is clever. It's it's well thought out how they did it, with the mood that they're trying to convey. The dinner scene, that when that dinner scene came out, I was like, I have seen, like, so many people have used this idea. Like, they got this, other horror filmmakers that have used this kind of setup, this kind of staging, this kind of acting, like, owe it to this movie. But I think this movie walks so that other ones could run. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, like, and maybe it's because, like, a lot of stuff, like, happens off screen, but it's like, when you're doing something off screen, I want to feel that implication of something. And in this, I don't ever feel that. It's, the guy gets, clobbered and then dragged behind a steel door and then shot, but that's all you get.
I mean, I don't know why you would need anything else, because it's just something that happens in an instant, and it's so sudden, and I just think it's really well executed in terms of just the sudden nature of it, along with the editing, and just. It just lands with a thud in a good way, I think. Like the thud to his head. I just think, I don't know. It starts to add to that unease of what the fuck is this house? Who are these people? Hermano, what did you think about this? I want to talk about this dinner scene towards the end of the movie, where to me it's this. It's the production design of, like, these arms on the arm of the chair, literally, and then the skin and the bones all around hanging from the ceiling and just laid up about, and just I don't know, and also it's the editing of the cuts to Marilyn Burns' eyes at haphazard angles while listening to her screams while the others at the table are singing and laughing. Like, how did that work for you, Hermano?
Yeah, that's when the film really picked up for me, though. I gotta admit, like, just the sheer amount of time they spend on her screaming, it almost got to the point where it became absurd, but it didn't quite get there for me, because it's like constant screaming for what felt like 15 minutes. But again, I did like some of the shot composition in there, like you're saying, like the close-ups on her eyes, like wide-eyed, and just, trying to capture that sheer terror that she must be, feeling, she's going through the motions, basically, with going through, like, insane amount of fear to trying to plead, appeal to, like, these clearly psychotic characters to please let her go, or don't let them do this. Like, who are you even talking to? Like, all these people are like a family. Like, none of them seem like they're going to be like the type of person that's going to be like, you know what, I've had second thoughts, let's let her go. But yeah, I don't know. The film, and I've said this about other films in the past, so I feel like I overuse this term, but it is a lot of, like, ups and downs. Like, there were moments I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I like this shot. I like this shot. I like this this thing here, and then it would just go to something ridiculous. Like, are we gonna do spoilers on this?
No, this movie is a classic. Everybody knows.
It's gonna be like, what, 50 years old in a couple of years.
Right.
Shut up.
She jumps through. I know we're old. She jumps through windows twice in this film.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but it just played comedically for me.
Oh man.
It just, I don't know why. I understand her, why she would do that. It's obvious, but like the scene that follows that after she jumps out of the window, the chase, it bordered on comedy to me.
Wow.
Like it's almost like she's like walking on struts or something. Like the way she's slowly, like I know the guy behind her is kind of toying with her, but like the chase that follows with Leatherface as well is like, I know that's the iconic scene, but I had it so different in my head. And it was one of those movies that I wished I had not seen it again because I had a better version of it in my head. And when I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, this is not at all what I remember, and not nearly as good as I remember. But still, the final few shots are iconic, and I cannot take away from those. But
oh yeah,
there were moments that it bordered on parody almost.
Oh man,
And, jumping off that, Hermano, like if you watch that final chase scene and you play the Benny Hill music, it lines up so good with it.
I don't doubt it.
That's a shame. Yeah, I don't know, that final shot with her in the truck and the just her reaction is,
she sells it. She sells it 100%.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's really interesting, just the how they chose the dawn, with the sun coming up and the of course the iconic shot of Leatherface, flipping that chainsaw around is it's, I don't know, it totally worked for me, especially the last half. I will say, yes, the opening, the beginning of this film with the characters, they're annoying, especially this guy in the wheelchair. You don't really understand about why he acts this way towards his sister, and you talk about scenes that play on for too long, like when they get to this old decrepit house or whatever that used to be their grandfather's, I guess. He's struggling to move his wheelchair into the house, and then he starts blowing raspberries up at the people on the second floor that are having fun, and he's jealous of. And I'm like, it goes on for, he does that so many times. I'm like, well, what's the point of this? Why are we lasting so long, on the scene? So yeah, there's certainly elements that take me out, and make me not want to rate this higher. But it's just that second half. To me, there's a reason that this movie is held in such a high regard. I think it's pretty unforgettable, to be honest with you. And I think anything in the second half kind of outweighs almost a lot that we see in the first half. Anything else about this movie that you guys want to mention?
Speaking of the guy in the blue truck, just imagine being that guy. You're coming over the hill and you fucking see whatever the fuck this is going on right now.
Right.
Like, there's a guy with a mask with a chainsaw, and there's like another dude like being chased around. There's another woman running in the middle of the street screaming. Like, do you stop? And like, or just be like, I am not getting whatever this is. This has nothing to do with me. Nope.
I do find it interesting the way this movie opens up on these crime scene photos and the sound effect of the camera light, camera lens or whatever, and just the radio voiceover. I think it.
And they brought that sound back for the 2002 remake.
It's interesting too. That sound is briefly heard in the 2022 movie sequel, where somebody opens a grill, I think, and you hear it. Do you remember that, Hermano?
I don't even remember that.
Yeah. It was pretty noticeable to me, and I just found it amusing. So, Hermano, any other things you want to mention about this movie?
Yeah, I was just looking through the trivia. I didn't realize that was John Larroquette that does the narration at the beginning.
Yeah, and he does it for the new one too.
Wow. Yeah, apparently he was only paid a joint for doing.
I mean, back then, man, you needed to hook up from somewhere.
This film has I'm still scrolling. It has one of the longest trivia sections I've ever seen.
Sure.
I've been scrolling for like over a minute.
It's one of the most well-regarded horror films of all time.
Well, the one thing I wanted to mention is that final scene with Leatherface kind of like dancing with his chainsaw.
Right.
Did you guys ever hear about the history of that shot?
I may have. Why don't you remind us?
I can't find it here, so I wanted to confirm, but I remember hearing that because of the heat and the frustration, and they were just having a hard day shooting and stuff. Like, Toby Hooper didn't really know how to end it after the girl gets away, and he was trying a bunch of different takes of like maybe Leatherface chasing after the truck or other things. And the actor got so frustrated during one of the takes that he started doing that and just wildly swinging the chainsaw around and almost like in a weird like dance or something. And they ended up going with that. And it was a totally like just random thing that he just ended up doing that wasn't even part of what Toby Hooper initially intended. So I remember hearing that. I don't know if it's true or not, but it sounds like something completely plausible because I remember hearing also that a lot of the actors had difficulty with the Texas heat.
Yeah, I believe it.
Especially during the dinner scene.
Now, let me ask you something, Hermano. You look at this movie directed by Toby Hooper, and then you go forward several years later, and you watch Poltergeist, and you have to look at various scenes in Poltergeist and say, yes, I can see how Toby Hooper directed this, and then you have to be like, well, he could never have directed something like this. This is definitely Spielberg.
I have to admit, there are definitely scenes in Poltergeist that definitely feel like they had Steven Spielberg's hand all over them. But didn't Toby Hooper also direct? There's another movie where I can't think of it now. I'm trying to look at his freaking filmography real quick. There's another movie that he directed. I thought it was possible. I'm looking at all his filmography and I'm like, man, none of this stuff even compares remotely to Poltergeist. So I don't know. There might be some truth to the Steven Spielberg stuff.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into grades. Wally.
It's a solid C.
Wow.
It's not terrible. It's not great. It's fine.
Oh man, please, Hermano. I'm gonna have you go next.
Okay, I'm gonna do B-. Like I said, I had a different memory of this film. I remarked to Mia multiple times about, I don't remember this. I thought this was different. I don't remember these characters being so annoying. And again, it could be that I'm putting 1 and 2 together. But yeah, B-. I kind of wish I hadn't seen it again.
Wow. So, I mean, I thought I was going to be low by giving this a B+. I thought I was doing some disservice to this movie by giving it a B+. And please, listeners, send your hate to Wally and Hermano. Send those emails directly to them.
Let's hear it.
Okay, that does it for this episode of the First Time Watchers podcast. Donate via patreon.com/firsttimewatchers or buy stuff at zazzle.com/firsttimewatchers.
Talk to us on Twitter at 1STTimeWatchers on Twitter.
Or write to us at our email, firsttimewatchers@gmail.com.
Please download our episodes on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Feel free to leave a review. Any feedback, we love it. If you have any suggestions of movies for us to watch, please send a tweet or an email. Speaking of suggestions, let's recommend a movie. Wally.
All right, since we're going with low budget, horror movies, and I'm going to go with a director that was certainly influenced by this, and that's Sam Raimi, with Evil Dead 2. The lone survivor of an onslaught of flesh-possessing spirits holds up in a cabin with a group of strangers while the demons continue their attack. I've always considered this to be better than the first Evil Dead, and a lot of people have that in high regard. I think that when this movie is basically like Sam Raimi basically kind of getting his mulligan for the first one, doing more of what he wanted to do with the first movie and getting to do it with the second movie after the success of the first. So yeah, this movie's just a lot of fun. Can't beat Sam Raimi with Bruce Campbell, as a lead. It's got the horror, it's got the comedy. It's just great top to bottom.
I will go next. So, for Spooky Movie Month, I wanted to watch something with my significant other that I had not seen since it was originally released in 2018 on Netflix, and that is Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House. I came away during my first viewing of that saying this is one of the best things I've ever watched, and it may be one of the best TV series I've ever seen. And on this rewatch, it confirmed that, and I cannot overstate this, that this is the single best piece of media I've ever seen. This is my favorite thing of all time. I was floored, and I was a sobbing mess by the end again. And I think for Spooky Movie Month, there's no better way that anybody could go about their day and by not watching The Haunting of Hill House. Flanagan directs every episode brilliantly and just balances like these scares and genuine emotion in the most perfect way. My words don't do justice to the beauty of the series. It's not just a horror tale. It's a fucking poem, guys. It's amazing. It is just brilliant. So watch The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. Hermano.
Mia's got me close to almost watching it, Tim. Hey, by the way, I haven't heard you bring up The Midnight Club.
I haven't finished it yet.
Oh, I have. Try to finish it by next week so we can talk about it.
Oh, God.
All right. I watched 5 films.
Oh.
And that's what I'm going to recommend. I'll recommend 4 of them. Well, the 4th one I will not. So I watched all 5 Final Destination films over the past week. You guys know what this is. It's basically if Rube Goldberg made a horror movie. So, they all involve people who survive, various catastrophes, and then death feels cheated and comes for them one by one. I will say I would recommend 1, 2, 3, and 5. Part 4, for whatever reason, I think 3D must have been at its peak because you could just tell that a lot of the effects are geared towards watching in the theater or, with 3D TV or something. So I think it suffers a little bit because of that. But they're all fun in their own way. They all have some pretty inventive kills. It's pretty gory. I will say that it definitely peaked with the first one, but I think the second one has the best.
Wait, you think it peaked with the first one? The second one is where it peaked.
I would say the first one's better than the second one.
Wow.
I always get confused. I always forget which one's the one with the roller coaster and which one's the one with the race cars.
Roller coaster is part 3. The race cars is part 4. Part 5 involves a bridge collapse. Part 2 is like the greatest, which is the highway scene.
Yes.
And part 1 is just the plane crash. But I will say that there is a 6th one in pre-production. And part 5 did something really clever.
Yes, I was going to say that, without spoiling anything. I remember watching this movie about halfway through. I picked up on something that I was like, wait a minute. I think this movie blank, blank, blank.
Yeah, I'd almost forgotten about it, but as I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, this is that film that did that thing. Pretty clever. You know, it's let's just say it's a little bit of a M. Night Shyamalan trick. So yeah, I recommend 4 out of 5 for the Final Destination films.
Nice. All right, stay tuned for our next episode. We'll be crossing off another List of Shame film for Wally by discussing Michael Mann's Thief.
That's the first time watch this podcast because we like to watch.
Like a chainsaw. Fresh flannel shirt, country bumpkin, lumberjack moves, aka Paul Bunyan. Run, yan. I make it right, run. Chainsaw. Drop it down low. Chop. Here we go. Teeth so sharp that they call them the jaws. I'm your boss, baby, crack it like a chainsaw.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Hello.
There we go.
That's right.
Here we go. You like my singing?
I do.
I have a great singing voice, don't I?
You like the voice of an angel, Tim.
Is this what I do after the podcast is over?
I bet you do.
Yeah?
Yeah, I bet you do.
I make it into... who should I go with? RCA Records? Are they still around? Or Sony?
I think what you just got to do is you just got to serenade your lady.
Do I go to? I would never do that. Do I go to Berry Gordy? Is he still around?
I don't know. I don't know about the record industry.
Well, what good are you, Wally?
Well, I was going to tell you that I know you like Transformers to an extent.
Okay.
And I was going to recommend to you, if you see them on the shelves, I got the Galvatron and the Megatron RED figures.
Okay.
So they're PVC like action figures that don't transform.
They don't transform.
No, they do not.
Well, what good is that?
But they're superposable and they look just like the cartoon. They're cartoon accurate.
Well, the point of Transformers, Wally, are to transform.
True, but the other point is that you can pose them. These guys come like superposable. I got Galvatron holding the Matrix of Leadership over his head like he just crushed Megatron for it.
It's half a toy, Wally.
Oh, I would recommend.
It's half a toy. It doesn't transform. It's false advertising, Wally.
And I just got a couple weeks ago I pre-ordered Tarn. I've been waiting for a figure of this thing for a while.
Wally, no.
And
It's
now they're
false
making one.
advertising. No, I will not purchase half a toy.